What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Big Bike BMX. My name is Isaac. I'm running the show solo tonight because Craig's got some family stuff to drive around, some friends. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm going to tell you how this interview came about. Being a BMX nerd, I saw a friend's suggestion on Facebook, and it was tonight's guest, Steve Giberson. And I was like, I know that name. Add friend. And Steve friended me back, and immediately I think I saw a URL for a website that I went and looked up, and I saw an online store with a lot of photos, and one of my favorite all-time all-around BMX riders, Peter Gusson, doing a handstand, like just doing that backwards roll handstand. And it's a great, you know what? No, I'm not going to grab it because I'm going to keep this going, but I'll put it up on screen. I actually made a video about it, so you can look down in the channel and find the unboxing of that picture. It's a fantastic picture. And so I've just been talking to Steve a little bit here and there, saying, hey man, please come on the show when you have time. And so he's got time. So tonight we are interviewing the photojournalist, the historian, content creator, Steve Giberson. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Dude, so we've been talking a little bit before we started the show. Give just like like the LinkedIn background of, because I know there's probably 1,000 people right now going, I know that name. How do I know that name? You know what I mean? Or they're just tuning in. They're like, that guy looks like Lou. Is that Lou? So yeah. Tell us your history.
Who the heck is this guy?
Yeah.
Well, I was grew up in Riverside, California, and back then a lot of my friends and I were into motocross, and actually the high school that I went to had a high school motocross team.
Really?
All 4 years.
What year did you graduate high school? What years were these?
78, so 74 through 78.
Man.
But every Friday, well, not every Friday night, but there was a season at Corona Raceway, and Friday nights, everybody would go out there. There'd be schools from all over the place, and it was pretty fun.
What was it like going to high school at Ridgemont High?
Yeah, that's a little bit of what it was like.
Yeah.
North High and Riverside. So the problem I had was my mom was an RN in an emergency room. Her and motorcycles were not even close to on the same page. So BMX was kind of the substitute for me. And I go back to the era where Stingrays and coaster brakes, and I went through all that. First race was at a track that Kevin McNeil ran, and it's just like this vacant lot track, that he built up, and I think we had rubber band starts and a mud hole, and it was pretty fun. But the problem I had there was, hey mom, can I go to this race? No. Hey dad, will you take me out to this race? Oh yeah, let's go. And I got both of us in trouble. So
it happens. Yeah.
So he would occasionally take me out to races in the Riverside area, and even I think we got out to Norwalk, and while I still didn't have a driver's license and couldn't get around, he would take me to races occasionally. So
right.
Later on, when I started kind of more in earnest, it was probably 78, probably 76, 77, 78. Just went from local racing to, started racing some nationals, and, got to where I was doing pretty good, and ended up, I actually rode for SC Racing for a while.
Nice.
I had a couple bike shop rides. Rick's Bicycle City in Fontana was one. Also, used to hang out with the guys from RRS. I didn't officially ride for them, but
right.
Went to a lot of races with those guys. Yeah, he was awesome. He set me up on a mongoose, and I actually won a national up in Tacoma riding a mongoose. Went to the next race and asked the team manager, hey, do you guys still have that contingency for winning trophy dashes? Yeah. And Jeff Kosmala was there, and he's like, what did you win? And I said, well, I won that race last week. And he was kind of embarrassed, I think, but it was pretty funny.
That's so
But
funny, dude.
and a little bit, I feel like Forrest Gump, where he kind of goes through history and meets people that are influential or famous along the way. Just out of high school, I used to work for Malcolm Smith, so growing up, I had seen the movie On Any Sunday about 1 million times, and to work from Malcolm was pretty amazing. So,
Dude, dude, I can't imagine what that was like having that's your first job. Like
yeah.
this
Well,
is what working's like. Cool.
the funniest part of it was, it's picking orders in the warehouse. He had Malcolm Smith racing products, so it was shopping carts with handlebars mounted to them and skateboards.
Yeah.
So during the day, that's my training program. I'm just pushing a shopping cart and picking orders and filling this thing up and wrestling it around, and then I'd go race at night. So,
Dude, that's
and
incredible. What a fun way to make a living.
yeah, and back then it was, SoCal, where you could race 4 or 5 nights a week if you wanted to. So it was pretty fun.
Did you have a favorite track back then?
Ooh, Corona was my local track, so
Yeah.
I'd probably have to go for that.
I'll come back to that question after. Like, as a grown up, did you have a favorite? And not just for the lighting, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
Well, yeah, Corona was terrible as a Friday night track.
yeah.
It was horrible out there. During the nationals, they'd have cars park along the sides. If it ran too long, they'd park cars along the sides and have them throw the headlights on and try and light it up. So
It's so old school. All right, so carry on. Like, right now you're right out of high school. Were you already interested in like photography? Because like I feel like that's a really, especially back in that era, what a hard hobby and expensive hobby to be
yeah,
involved.
it was not easy to get involved in it. At that point, I was still thinking, hey, I'm doing okay in racing. While I was still working for Malcolm, I actually got picked up by SE Racing,
Yeah.
so rode for Scott back in the day, and it was right after Stu had left the team. So I think I went to a local race and had some guy ask me, "Hey, are you Stu's replacement?" No, I'm not Stu's replacement. I'm nowhere near Stu's replacement, but
No
it was just
pressure.
kind of funny timing. Yeah.
Yeah. What bike did you ride?
PK.
A PK?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right
I
on.
never,
That's
I never tried a quad, and, Rod Beckering was on it and he was more than happy with it. So I was happy to stay on the
the
PK.
PK.
Yep.
Love that. How long
So,
did you ride for SE?
oh, probably 3 or 4 years. Um, you were asking if I was interested in photography at that point. Yeah, I was thinking I'm going to be the next red hot racer out there,
Yeah.
and had not long after I got on SE, I broke a wrist, and that was kind of a big setback. The doctor in the ER didn't do such a great job of setting that one, and
Yeah.
it's still crooked.
Oh
And
no.
then, oh yeah, and it looks customized. I don't think you see it, initially, but if I point it out, yeah, it's not too hard to miss. Um, and then after that, it was on this side. You can, well,
Oh yeah, you can see. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's customized.
Yeah.
That side was never as strong again.
Right.
So every time this hand had come off, if I'm tangling with somebody, I would go that way, and then I started pounding my collarbone into the ground.
Right.
I broke that thing 7 times before I started looking for a substitute. And I was going to motocross nationals and like, hey, I see these spots that really cool looking, and it'd be neat to shoot photos, and that's really kind of how I got into it. So, bought a camera and started just shooting some local races and things like
Right.
that. And this was, I was still racing, and then went up to a national at Grass Valley, and I'd been contributing little bit to BMXA already, or back then Bicycle Motocross Action. So
Right. Right.
Full spelled out way. And Bob Osborne was asking me about a guy that he was thinking for hiring as at a, in a darkroom spot at the magazine. I went, well, I don't know much about that guy, but that sounds like a cool job. I'd be into doing something like that. And that's kind of how I ended up over at BMXA.
Dude,
So
that's crazy.
yeah, it was pretty fun.
I'm just thinking of like all the money you save at that point. Now you're like, okay, now there's a dark room here. Probably like you probably have some type of film allowance or something. I'm hoping. Um,
No, not at that point.
oh my gosh, dude, no way.
Yeah, it was still out of pocket. And I
Yeah,
mean, back in those days, it was, if you're shooting slide film, it was probably, by the time you did film and processing, it was about $20 a roll. So for 36 photos,
oh dude,
you
just as a normal person, dude, I can tell you like I I rode I rode bikes from 80 to 91, and I have two rolls of film that I saved up money. I saved up money to buy the film. Um, some dude that like lived in my apartments is like, I'm a photographer, I'll take the photos. So it was like I saved up for like a long time for the money to get it developed and to buy like the roll of film. Like I think I bought two rolls of film each time. And dude, yeah, I remember it was like such a big deal. Like, Mom, can we go by the photo mat and see if my photos are done? And then you get them and you're just like, and I still have like a photo book of some of them. And I just look at them like, bro, I think you just had an Instamax camera is what it was. And you probably were just trying to like be nice to my mom or like ask her out on a date or something. Cause these are not everything is just this. There's no angle, bro. It is just straight on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I remember way back as a kid, I took an Instamatic out to, I think, Ontario Motor Speedway, and shooting photos of Indy cars out there. So
Dude, yes. I love that.
pretty pretty funny.
So when you started working at BMXA and you're I mean, would you say that's like an intern? I don't know how you try and like relate it to what it
Kind
is today.
Yeah, it was running errands. Oz would bounce ideas off me for things. It'd help photo pics, work on processing black and white film. Color always went to a lab, so didn't have to worry about that. But
Right.
processing and printing black and white prints, learned how to do all that with them. Um, yeah, the warehouse needed sweeping, do that. If we needed
Right.
ship back in the day when they were shipping magazines out of the back of the warehouse, I would box up magazines. So
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah. I
mhm.
mean, you probably went through like all the like the mail that we would send into. You probably were like you'd see that stuff, right? Like that's crazy.
uh, I mean, later on, I think like for Dear Whiz, I would open up all the mail and pick out the good ones and pass those along to Oz. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it kind of was gradually add on and learn things as I'm going.
Yeah.
Um, they wanted to make a change at editor at one point, and I all of a sudden I get quizzed a lot on, hey, if you were the editor, what would you do? So there was a lot of that. Um, and then once I got kind of formally moved into that spot, it felt like a 4-year college education in probably 6 months. You
Right.
know, I remember spending all weekend working on a story, and it, not to make it sound like it's too old, but I mean, originally I was longhand writing these things out and then typing it in. And then we got some of probably the first laptop or portables. And it was these K-Pro computers it was like a MS-DOS thing with a little tiny amber screen. And, you had to load, there wasn't any memory on it. So you're loading the operating system on it with a floppy disk every time you fire the thing up. But I mean, at that point, we're way ahead of the curve. We're not typing them out longhand. You can, you can use arrow keys to cursor around on the screen and change typos or fix typos and
Right.
change your sentence without having to retype the thing. So it was kind of a cool time to be there.
Dude, yeah, I mean, I just have like random questions, dude. Like, did you at the time, did you know the impact that like those magazines had on like us kids that read them? Were you getting that feedback? Did you realize like the legacy that would leave?
Well, I was one of those kids. I would do the long ride from Riverside to Fontana to go to Rick's Bicycle City just to see if they had the new magazine in,
Right.
and I knew roughly when it was supposed to show up, but that was a long haul to go do that. Um, yeah, originally I found a copy of the first issue of Bicycle Motocross Action on the newsstand in the Greyhound bus station in Riverside. And I was so freaking blown away that there's a not, you know, that there's a magazine out there and
Right.
it's talking to me. It was pretty cool. So
Yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
think for a lot of us.
I got the impact for sure because, like I said, I was one of those kids. But even when I was working there, the questions that people would send in, the comments you would get, you know, it was a month between issues. So everybody's just reading every little detail that they can get out of these things. And if you had something wrong, you heard about it.
Oh, I'm sure.
So you didn't want to make any of those mistakes and or say the wrong thing or miss ID somebody or because
Right.
you were definitely going to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean dude. If you go on BMX Museum today or go on any BMX forum, nothing's changed. We are still the same group of people that we love
Hmm.
correcting in general. And now the age we're at, we love it even more. Like, yeah, you
Yeah,
have.
I mean any special interest group. It's funny because I always say or hear people say in this industry, no, it's like that for if you're in motocross, supercross, if you're in mountain bikes, BMX, it's all the same. Everybody's that into it.
Right.
The people that are into it are into it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like I mean, I look at it, the more I look back and think about like that decade. Um, dude, yeah, it was like a like our Bible, our cult or whatever, like we definitely live by it. And it's so funny to think about like the production time, say on the magazine, right? So like something happens and then you have maybe 2 months in the future. 2 months
Yeah,
later is when you're going to read about
it
it,
was it was about 3 months. Yeah, I mean, really, when we're doing December issues, it was always in about August. So, I mean, you're wanting to write about, hey, look in your Christmas tree for your next BMX frame, and you're hot and sweaty, right, typing the stuff in the office.
Right? Yeah,
So,
it's 102 and you're wearing the Life's a Beach t-shirt. Yeah, I get it.
mhm.
um
But I
so
mean, it was just I don't think you could ever have that again. And now it's the internet, and then it's instant gratification, and you know you see it on your phone before you know it's not going to wait for 2 or 3 months or a
no,
week or a minute
content is 24/7.
or a minute. Yeah, it's a fire hose all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember because you think about like the VHS stuff, even like if you think about the progression, right? So handwritten long form, then okay, now we're typing, now we're over here doing like whatever. I forget the program back then. I jumped to InDesign, right, or something like that, right? But before that, there was
Oh,
Quark.
Quark. And
Yeah,
yeah,
Quark. Okay,
yeah.
so
And this is years before any of that. So
right, yeah, you're probably just like I just can't imagine how that happened in the process of it.
yeah,
Um,
there was a full art department there. It's all pasted up on boards with they'd use a waxer to the type would get sent out, come back, they'd wax it. That's what sticks it to the page. So, um,
right.
yeah, it
That
was pretty interesting.
that's the fact to me. That stuff's fascinating. Like just thinking like because all I saw was the end result every month, and to me, even, typos and all or whatever, like it was still polished, right? There was, because, like I, if there was a typo, well, there was a typo in the, there's way more typos in the paper I turned into my teacher last week. So, for me, I'm like, I'm grading on a curve. And so y'all doing way better than I was. But, the creativity and the, like what those magazines I think brought out in this generation. Plus, yeah, it's the time too, right? Everything was bright and big and like
New,
fluorescent
yeah.
and roller skating, and everything was bright and big then. But yeah, I think the timing of it, because we had to have that patience. It's not like now where you open Instagram and there's a new reel from someone in the UK, and then I'll wake up tomorrow morning and there's a new reel from somebody in Los Angeles. And so it never stops. I mean, thinking about like the waxing of boards and then putting that stuff up there. um what was it like watching or just being in that industry, especially at that magazine, during the technology change? And then there was also kind of that the industry kind of siloed into BMX and freestyle.
Yeah, yeah. I was from the racing side more, but I was also there when they fired up freestyle, and we would have more and more freestyle stuff in BMX action, and it was cool because you know at one point I was roommates with RL over there,
Yeah.
so while he was you know he had 1,000,001 sponsors, and it's really taking off. We had a symposium at BMX Action for, hey, here's what freestyle is, and invited all the manufacturers in, and here's what it is. Here's what the equipment is. Here's, what you need to look at. It was pretty funny. So, but it was just, it was something that you put your heart and soul into all the time. And because we were always coming up with concepts for how we wanted to, you know, do the story. What's the intro photo going to be? What's the tone of the text? What's the, big spread photos? How are we going to build this thing out? So, and even just figuring out the table of contents every month, it was a challenge, and you're always trying to one up yourself.
Yeah, I can't imagine the pressure you would feel doing stuff like that, especially like, you've got, I don't know, Stu jumping a Porsche, right? And then you're like, what do we have him jump now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, for that one, I drove with Oz. We towed the ramp, drug the ramps out there. We had 3 or 4 sketchy wood ramps, and we're trying to adjust the angle of this thing. And it's funny because I've seen in photos of that one in particular. I remember just on the edge of the leading edge of the first car, it was like a dust track, you know, of I think he had comp threes on there.
Yeah,
Okay, we need to adjust this just a little bit,
right.
but it was kind of that fine, and but sketchy ramps, and yeah, awesome photos.
Yeah, amazing. Just amazing memories, just to be like I was there, you know what I mean? And say like I was there, and I remember what that was like. I remember, the things
Well,
the
those,
things that like blows us. I think that stuff blows us all away as fans, right? Just to be like,
yeah,
there was a kid that was there too. It wasn't just like Oz, like there was a fan there too. That's what makes it so much cooler to hear your side of it.
yeah. Well, that was a lot of the stuff that I used to set up back in the day. Those, uh, remember the flaming hoop
Oh
that
yeah, yeah.
so we'd set that up out in front of the office at Wizard, and wrap it up in gauze and soak it in lighter fluid or gas or whatever we were using. And now it seems like such a terrible idea, but back then we were just sending it.
Dude,
It's pretty funny.
I feel like everything at Wizard was just a what, like what if, you know what I mean? I really feel like in for you younger kids, man, I would say like if you were to work at Mythbusters is probably what the Mythbusters of, but put that in BMX terms, where it's like, instead of like all the gadget, like gazmos and gazmos, all the trinkets and gizmos that Adam Savage has, Steve and everybody has that at their warehouse, and they're like, hey, do you think you could jump through this hoop? I don't know. Yeah, let's try it. And everything was just yes. I mean, everything from the Club Homeboy chopped car, where like they chopped the station wagon or whatever that car was, and there's 118 people sitting in the back of that thing driving down the road. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you see stuff like that, and you're like, you got like you enabled that. You know what I mean? Like you let us live that life. You know what I mean? And trust me, we were doing that same kind of stuff in Stockton and in Des Moines, Iowa, and
Oh, absolutely. There was,
Hoboken, New Jersey. You know what I mean?
yeah, there were hot spots all over the place. It was cool because it was kind of like a creative hub, especially when we launched Freestyle or Freestyle Magazine. Then you had Andy and Lou and Spike, and um, it was like the two different camps. I think the BMX Action side was probably a little more heavy metal, and if you wanted, Bauhaus and Duran Duran and The Cure,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That would be more the freestyling guys.
What were the
But
conversations like when that happened? Do you remember the first conversation, like, hey, we might do another magazine?
uh, not specifically, but it was, the plan was there, and just you could feel the energy building up too. I went up to San Francisco right before Oz went up to do the photo shoot with the Curb Dog guys, and or go to the Golden Gate Park, and it was a lot of the Curb Dogs. And when I was up there, I saw those guys and the kind of street influence that they had going on, and I came back and told them, however much film you're planning on taking, double it, because you're going to need it. There was a lot going on up there.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see that going on. And then the way we worked, I think we would stay there till 2 in the morning some nights and come in at noon the next day, and kind of start all over again. So
Right.
um, go collapse for a few hours and then come back and just get fired up and figure out what's next.
Yeah, the deadline doesn't change. Just you do the work when you do the work, right?
Yeah. And there were deadlines, so yeah, you had to be on it. But trying to schedule photo shoots, these days it would be a text,
Right.
probably handled all via text. And back then it's photo shoots, and you had to figure out how to get there and get everybody to the same place at the same time without GPS. And
Dude, I can't even
it
imagine.
was pretty funny. It was a lot of Thomas guides, and
Yeah.
yeah, now I'm making myself sound really old. So
No, dude, not I do, because to put it in perspective, I mean, you got to think, like, let's say you want to do a photo shoot. Hi, is Scotty there? Like, I'm yes, I'm a grown up, but I need to talk to your 14-year-old son, Scotty Freeman, about setting up a freestyle shoot. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm.
and like I look back at it and I think trying to talk to my kids that are 16, and the amount of like words that they vocalize in a day, which is none. So I
Mhm.
can't imagine like, if you would have got me on the phone, hi, hey, we need to do a photo shoot. Okay. Like, you would
Yeah,
have to guide me through that whole thing.
I will say, typically, if you called from BMXA and you wanted to do a photo shoot, there was full buy-in from everybody.
I
Sometimes
bet.
it might you might have to do it through their sponsor or something like that. And
Right.
yes, we're doing that.
Right.
It kind of wasn't that big an issue.
I love that, dude. I want to ask you kind of about like the different like places that, because what you live the memory that I had, because I only saw the Stockton Fairgrounds BMX. That's the only racetrack I ever saw until I moved to Arizona, and now I've got the world famous Chandler BMX like 10 minutes from my house. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
and that, that's a historic track too. But I mean, for me, it was like my first BMX track was in Lodi, and it was like what you described, where I'm pretty sure it was just a dude that probably didn't even own the land on it,
Hmm.
scraped up a track and he would just charge people $5. I don't think there was even an association. It was just like, and he kept the points in his head or something. It was just like one of those spots, but it was rad. It served its purpose, man. I felt BMX.
Yep.
And then going to Stockton Fairgrounds, that was like big leagues, right? Because that was an ABA track, and it was such a big deal. Nationals would show up there. What were some of your favorite places to shoot and to visit?
Ooh. I mean, Chandler was kind of always a big one every year. But
Right.
and any of the nationals back in the day, Rancho, I was lucky to be around while there were some fairly nutty tracks around.
Right.
Um, Rancho was fun because it was kind of a crazy track where it was a little bit like a bowling ball. So it's really flat on the top. And then once you get going into the first turn, it's really starting to pick up speed and momentum. I remember going to a race there where uh, it was Kosmala and Kenny Nachman, and on the side hack, and Kenny's screaming like a little girl, "Turn, Cos, turn!" Because that turn's coming up fast, and he's pretty sure they're not going to make it. So,
Right.
and
Or he's
side
not.
hacks to me, yeah, and side hacks to me were still like the worst idea ever.
Yeah.
I mean, as a kid, I cut off a back half of a bike, got some plumbing pipe, had a friend of mine weld one together. And of course, we take it to the biggest hill we can find in Riverside, which was Mount Rubidoux. And there's a paved road that goes up and back down. So I talk a friend of mine into being the monkey, and we've got like zero practice time on this thing. And
Maiden voyage.
yeah, so we get like halfway down the hill, come around this one corner, and there's a really big rock on the outside and a cliff on the other side of that. And he leans way out. Well, it picks up the back tire, and it's coaster brake. So all of a sudden there's no brakes, and we smashed that thing and caved in the front end and cartwheeled, but luckily didn't go over the cliff. So,
Right.
we did a lot of dumb stuff back then.
Insert Jackass theme music right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Dude, that's rad. I love those like downhill like Dirty Fest this year had a downhill track, and barely a berm at all, really. It was just like a skid.
Yeah. But you're asking about favorite place to shoot. Sometimes it was just like word of mouth, hey, there's some new jumps over here. You know, there were a few fairly well-known just like spots to go shoot, bike tests or things like that, or we'd go to a track, or you know, a lot of it kind of was word of mouth, I think.
Yeah.
So
There's always those like session spots like that where you're like, hey, a friend of a friend of a friend. Like
mhm.
growing up in NorCal was like that with like Magoo. Someone not Magoo, Gork. Somebody was like, hey dude, I know where the Gork trick team parks their ramp. It's I think it's his aunt's house or something. And dude, it was
Mhm.
like neighborhood legend. Like people, like you were 3 people removed from Gork at that point. You were just like, I've made it. You know what I mean? Here we are. But like
Yep.
those local neighborhood spots like that, like oh, there's some jumps over here because they're building some apartments, and they dug everything up, and it just made this perfect like jump track. That would be fun. um
Yeah, and then sometimes in the spring it gets knocked down because they're trying to get the weeds back down, and
right. Yeah.
you start all over again too.
Did like y'all did a really good job of like covering local scenes too. I really felt like that you like living in NorCal. I remember the freestyling, where everyone came up. But like for me, I think when I look back at like BMX action before freestyling, that's when it was, because like back then your bike was just your bike. I wasn't a freestyler. I just rode bikes. I didn't have a label to it. I didn't have anything. Like I rode a BMX bike, right, with pegs, and maybe I could do a tail whip or an endo or something like that. But wherever the day took you, the day took you. Maybe you went to Stockton, you rode, 2 hours to Stockton fairgrounds, or you rode 2 hours to Galt because you heard about a half pipe that some skateboard kid had, and he knew somebody from somebody, and you could ride the ramp. Y'all did a great job of like covering that stuff. What was that like, finding that like in the Midwest when you would be out doing stuff like that? Because I feel like you covered everything.
Yeah, I remember a time where I think it was somewhere near or somewhere in Illinois, and these guys had these metal, like it was just pipes, and they were kind of flexy. And I don't know how we got in touch with those guys. If they had sent photos in and said, "Hey, come out and check out our scene," or if we'd heard about it while we were out there covering a race, something like that. But oftentimes there would it be like a side thing to traveling somewhere for the weekend for a race, and then you find these other little things going on, jumping spots or like those the metal ramps.
Yeah.
And it you know some of it was planned, some of it was happenstance, I would think. um, but it just that kind of energy, people would come up and talk to Oz at races all the time, and that's how I ended up originally, starting to do some contributing for him. Back in the day, there were some aluminum stems that seemed like a great idea at the time. And this is full aluminum, but it was still single wide on the clamping area on the bar. And I think I took one of those, Bennett, and then decided, well, I'm going to repurpose this thing and build myself a seat post clamp because it actually fit on the seat tube. And it was probably one of the first aluminum seat post clamps. And then shortly after that, we started seeing all the normal ones that you would see today,
Right.
expect to see. But back then it was, hey, stamped steel is good enough.
Right.
That's perfectly fine.
It'll work.
Yeah. So, I would come up with little creative things like that. And that's how I ended up talking to Oz. And he's like, well, hey, write something up on that. So, he was a bit of a beacon at the races for things like that. So,
Right.
I don't know how he shot half the photos he did, because he's talking to manufacturers and riders and, wacky kids like me. So
I love that.
yeah.
What like, so when you're moving on in your career, and so at this point, like, the magazines have split. Was did you ever feel competition with freestyling, or was there was there competition with that, or was it just with, and also like with Plus, did you feel like there was like huge rivalry with Plus? I've heard there was, but I don't know
Yeah.
I've only heard one side of it. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, it used to just bother Oz to no end that, Plus was even around, I think. So, but, I think some of the numbers that they would claim for circulation, he's going, there's no way they're doing that. There's no way they're doing that, and
Right.
we had pretty good circulation at the time. I don't remember what the numbers were, but, you were kind of like, yeah, I don't know how they're claiming what they do, but they were in an awful lot of liquor stores and places that we wouldn't be. I think we had kind of some of the better newsstand locations, but
Right.
they were in a, it might not have been the nicest place, but they were definitely out there in a lot of other places. So
Right.
and I never, like John Card, we've always gotten along great, and the people that work for the magazine or the respective magazines, it's all well and good. And then, was there competition with freestyling? Not really. It's like, I don't know, brothers, you kind of want to outdo each other, but you also, you're going to defend them and wish the best for them and all that too at the
Sure.
same time.
Sure. What was it like then, like at the later years for you?
Um, it got a little weird for me. Advertising got to be such a huge deal. I think Oz felt like there was it was going to be like the motocross industry, where it had gone from a bunch of different manufacturers down to a small handful. And at one point he pitched with a bunch of the manufacturer, or it was a 4 or 5. Hey, if you advertise this amount per issue, you guys will, and it was promised to him, you guys will get the dominant editorial coverage. So, I've heard him say in the past that we took care of the advertisers. Maybe it was a little more than that.
Right.
But the first issue comes out after this plan gets started, and there was a lot of one manufacturer. The next issue comes out, there's a lot of another manufacturer. I'm the editor at that point, and all of a sudden, guess whose fault it is? It's mine.
Right.
So, which, and at one point he told me, "Hey, I'd like to think you didn't do this on purpose." Which, I mean, for somebody that put heart and soul into that magazine and everything else, that stung. So probably not long after that, it was time to, I decided it was time to depart.
Right.
And went over to Redline actually, and worked there for about a minute and a half as their team manager. It was kind of interesting to see how, how the other half lives over there.
Right.
To be on the manufacturer side. So that was kind of interesting.
Well, tell me more about that. Like, what the capacity you were at Redline, coming from, I feel like you would have such a great insight into the industry, and then now you're working in one specific brand's part of the industry. What was it like seeing that window into like, oh, this is what it's like?
It was kind of funny because at one point I felt like the tail was wagging the dog a little bit. We would call team managers and say, "Hey, what races are you guys going to coming up?" And they'd say, "No, we want to know what races you're going to." And it's like, wait a second, that's not how it's supposed to work. And so it was odd. Everybody wanted the coverage, so they would, sometimes we would choose poorly and go to maybe not the best races, and then the next day they're flying to some other race somewhere else to go, where they really wanted to be. So
right.
it was definitely different. And while I was at Redline, it was interesting because I think it showed up in Rad in about 1 second long clip, but I had Scott Clark drive the Redline motorhome up there, and they're doing the parade through the town, and I think it shows up for about exactly 1 second in there. So that was a interesting thing to call one of your riders and tell them, "Hey, I want you to do this really long drive in a motorhome."
Right.
And at the time, I don't think he was too stoked on it. Now he's probably okay with it.
Right.
To have been involved in something like that. So
that's great. Like, when you think about, like, I'm going to pose this question for both. Like, if you look back, is there anything you would do, like, if I like, hey, could I take this back? Could I do something differently? What would you do differently about your departure from BMXA? And then maybe like Redline as well.
Redline was actually okay because I ended up going to work at Super BMX, and when I was working at Redline, I was driving from Torrance to Camarillo 5 days a week, which that is not a short drive, even back then when traffic was a lot better.
No, dude, that's far. You guys, that's a far drive, you guys. Without traffic, that's far.
It was like 1.5 2 hours, I think, each way every day. So that one kind of wasn't going to be a long-term deal anyway. So could I have been more mature when I was working at BMX Action? Sure. Could I have?
You were a kid though.
Yeah, and I had long hair and I was scruffy, and I was straight out of Riverside. So
right.
Could I have cleaned up my act a little bit? Could I have been more professional? Sure, but I knew what I knew at that point. So
right.
Yeah, I would love to say that, yeah, I could have been smarter about it, or but I back then I was making, I think, the princely sum of maybe 24 grand a year, and thinking this is as good as it gets.
Right.
So
We have
so,
arrived.
yeah, and I'm like, how if I leave here, how am I ever going to replace this?
Right.
Yeah, it worked out okay. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
That's a great life lesson. I hope if you don't take anything away from anything that you've heard tonight, it's that like you're going to be all right. Life
yeah.
pivots and you're going to be all right.
Well, when I went to work at Super, it was a little bit on the cheesy side. When they had their uh, models and actors and actresses, you'd have Ron House posing with them in a studio shot, and it was a little bit like Tiger Beat. And I I
Yeah.
I think you know brought some more. It changed it up a little bit and got rid of a lot of that and made
Right.
it more of a serious magazine. And then at that point, we had Freestyle magazine, which originally freestyling was supposed to be called Freestyle, and then Challenge Publications had already previously used that title, so they had to switch it to freestyling, which
Oh, no
is
way.
pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but we were doing freestyle and super, and about every 3 weeks had a complete issue due. So we were just cranking those things out. That was kind of a high speed treadmill over there.
Yeah.
And then when I think we had a test that DT objected to, and where we had Rich Bartlett as a test rider, who was Rich is not a small dude,
Right.
and crushed that thing. You know, I it I don't think it did well, and I don't it wasn't one of their high end bikes. It was like probably a half and half mild steel chromoly thing, and
Right. Yeah.
oops, it bent, and
Right.
they were not very happy, and I think they pulled some advertising, and probably about that point, things were tightening up in the industry anyway,
Yeah.
and they closed it down. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm working for Mountain Biking Magazine instead of Super BMX. So that was another hard career change.
How hard, I mean, how hard was that? Did like I always wondered how honest those reviews were, and like how, because you would see someone doing something, let's say like on a I'm gonna say brands like this that I remember. So let's say a wind styler, right? Like you knew that was kind of down the row, or a street styler, not a street beat, and you'd see someone doing some big air on like the mid to lower tier bikes, and you're like, how did they even live that land? How did they survive that landing?
They
How
were they
honest were
were
those?
they were I would say you had to be kind to them on occasion, but if the guy lands really smoothly, you know, you you could get away with a lot, but if you flat bottom something, things could go wrong in a hurry. But
Right.
you you had a lot of manufacturers back then that had really high end product, and all of a sudden it's a race to the bottom. Hey, we're going to make our 199 version of what our Pro Series bike is, and hopefully it lives okay. It looks like the real one, but
Right.
everybody kind of knows that it's not the same thing.
Right.
But but I mean, you had Hutch, GT, Haro, everybody was kind of racing to the bottom. So here's our 150 model. I
Right.
don't I I get that they would want to do that, but man, it I don't think it helped the industry at all. Um,
There were some
you
weird
know,
things
it,
that got tested. You know what I mean? Like those,
yeah,
like remember the gravity propelled, the GPV bikes. Like,
yeah. That I was, I'll be honest, I was never a huge fan of that because there was a lot of terrible idea going on. Um,
dude, I,
you know, I mean, really, the brakes were not made for it.
no,
This is
God,
this
no,
is
I
with
didn't even think about
this
the
is with
brakes.
this is with caliper brakes. This
Yeah,
isn't this isn't even V brakes or discs or something like that. You can just melt these things
melt them.
down.
Yeah,
Those tires were not made for the speeds that they were going.
right.
Um, yeah, that's kind of the thing where you'd shoot but you're looking between your fingers,
Right.
I'm having flashbacks to my mom, as a RN in an emergency room going, this is not a good idea.
Yeah, right. Yeah. When kids are sitting around going, man, if 80s kids are sitting around going, this looks sketchy. You know what I mean? Like at that point, that's a
And
good barometer.
yeah, and you had some fairly talented guys out there. Okay, maybe the guys that aren't so talented, you'd worry about those guys. And then like that tramway race where I think they actually passed the motorcycle that is trying to film them, where there's a guy sitting backwards on that thing.
Right.
And, okay, now who's gonna let off in the next corner? The TV guy that needs his shot, or the rider, that doesn't want to get passed by everybody else.
Right.
It's just scary stuff.
Dude, I just remember thinking like that was just a movement I couldn't get behind. Like I didn't have enough money to have an extra bike to turn upside down and put a fairing on. Like, and to me, like there's no, like there's thrill, but it wasn't BMX. To me, it wasn't BMX. And I was just like so confused by, as a kid, just being like, oh, it's one of those, that's the issue this month. It's the
Well, yeah, and we were getting spin-offs of spin-offs. There was the scooters, the
oh, dude,
scooter
yeah.
thing went nuts for a minute.
Oh,
So
the scooters, I remember scooters, but I remember having a lot of stupid fun on those scooters because, like, someone would put like Mongoose or somebody put pegs on one, and you're like, oh, I can, as a kid, I can stand over the top tube on the pegs and do hops, like I was like stupid. I think I learned decades on a scooter because you're like, well, this ain't that scary. And so,
yeah, yeah, and I think one time there was a scooter with a skateboard truck on the back and skateboard wheels, and
yeah.
just like I said, spin-offs of spin-offs. So
Oh, I'm sure, dude. Yeah, I remember some of those gimmicky ads,
yeah, but it was, everybody was kind of looking for, hey, what's the next hot thing, and where do we go from here? And
Dude,
it got, it went from very innocent and just organic to it got a little weird about the time I got out of it. So
yeah, it like I can only, the only experience I have a picture of it too. It's kind of funny, like talking about like how quickly things were moving. And um I have a picture from Interbike when I was there with MCS. And I remember I had an ACS Doubler, which was a gimmicky kind of a science. It worked, but not great. And it was supposed to, like, you put a pulley on your front brake and it basically doubled the stopping power on your front brake, especially when you had like a POTS mod. And so I remember I was like, oh, I'll try that. I saw it in the magazine, and I'm at Interbike, and I'm just sitting at the jam circle, and some dudes that, like, they didn't speak English came over and were just like pointing at it, getting all up on my bike, taking pictures of it. And I'm like, well, ACS, that's knocked off now,
yeah,
and you're just like, now I'm going to see 12 different versions of an ACS doubler.
yeah.
But that's
You
it.
used to go
That's
to
what
the
it was, right?
you'd go to the bike shows, and there would always be people shooting stuff in booths, and the manufacturers would try and chase them out. But yeah, Taiwanese manufacturing, the cat was out of the bag at that point. So
Yeah, like you had to have it like production and have like 1,000 frames ready to go, or else you might find your
yeah,
idea somewhere else.
well, and your intellectual property, your patents all buttoned up and everything else too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you have
and
like,
and be ready to defend it and spend
right,
the
yeah.
time and money and energy doing that. So
Yeah. I think that's because it seemed like there was a, like you're right, the way you described, like an organic, like I started seeing parts and things like that, a lot of it engineered, thought through. And then all of a sudden it just seemed like there was ads for half skateboard, half scooter bike. You know what I mean? Like there was all kinds of wacky, oh, just weld a bar on it and show a kid on it, and it's a freestyle bike now, right? Just what?
standing platform and pegs everywhere, and
Right.
some of it useful, some of it not. So
Yeah, you see some of that stuff. I remember just thinking like, what in the, does someone stand there? What do you do? Like, we just made a
how do
whole
you
bike
make
for a
use of that?
trick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Um, So I want to kind of move to after you moved to out of the freestyle and then you moved into the mountain biking world. Um, what was that transition like for you? So, like photography, was there, it seems like it would be a pretty close match. And a lot of the BMX guys were moving over there too at the same time, I feel like.
Yeah, Eric Carter, Dave Cullinan, actually John Tomac was probably one of the early adopters.
Right.
So, there was some familiarity to it. Some of the BMX guys didn't show up till later on, when things maybe got a little worse back in the day.
Right.
But it was a transition time for those guys too. So,
Right.
but to me, mountain biking always felt like, hey, it's a mix of dirt. It's got two wheels. It's got a sort of a moto element to it, especially once they're doing dual slalom and downhill.
Right.
It felt very, you know, normal to me. And I think I was able to bring a lot of that action style stuff from BMX action and the sport at that time over to the mountain bike side where it brought new energy too, because it went from the clunkers to they were advancing. There was a lot of energy there and a
Right.
lot of innovation. So it was a really fun time to be involved in that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Go to Interbike, and Paul Turner from RockShox says, "Hey, take my bike and go ride it at that curb or ride it into that curb." And we're like, "No, that's going to hurt." He's going, "Just do it." Yeah. So it was pretty cool being involved in stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw a pair of like shocks on a pedal bike before, like real shocks, like something that's
Hmm.
like substantial, not just not just a strut, that someone welded on in someone's, garage, but like an actual
Right.
rock shock or something like that. So nowadays you've got your online store, because I want to talk, I'm dying to talk about your store and your photos, because like that's where I'm at now, is like, dude, I just want to look through all your photos and see the photos that you've got, and following you on Facebook, there's always like new crazy things that you're posting up there that I've never seen. Um
It's funny. People have been going, "Hey, I love this. I've never seen this before." Well, I've had these photos stored in the cellar for 40 years, so they've been carefully aging down there.
right, right,
Some some of them were things that ran in magazines, like when I was working at Super back in the day. Um, some of that stuff came home with me at the end, when we closed it up. Um, Probably left tons more there still. Same type thing, at BMXA when I left there, all those photos stayed there, and then they went into the dumpster at when that closed down.
oh,
So
oh man,
yeah, that kind of stuff is a little bit painful, but it's fun to be able to dig some of these things up. After BMX and mountain bikes, I spent a good 20 years shooting supercross and motocross. So um, I was tired of looking at that stuff, and
right.
just decided to go back and revisit some of the old things, and dig it out of the garage, and a certain percent of it has, or a certain percentage has never been seen. So
Right.
people trip out on that kind of stuff. The jam circle photo that you're talking about. Um, you'd asked me a while back, "Hey, do you have any photos of me from back in the day?" Not that I can think of. And then I think I immediately pulled up two where you're in the background, or
Right. You're like, I think this is you right here. I'm like, that's
yeah.
absolutely me, dude. Oh, you guys here? I'll share it. Hold on one sec. First, let me make this big. All right. So here we go. This is the jam circle at Interbike. Mark McKee right here. You will notice right over on the right-hand side, if you look, you will see your friend Isaac sitting right here, looking at Chris Day, my favorite rider there, absolutely intimidated by everybody else that you can see in the photo. So
I'm super disappointed though. You don't have the nearly the mullet that these other guys do.
I everybody had long hair. Every single person had a mullet. And apparently I didn't have any vision or Life's a Beach. You shouldn't have showed up if you didn't have a Life's a Beach shirt, clearly. Um, or
Yeah,
the Vision shirt.
it looks like half the Vision Streetwear warehouse just blew up.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Dude, I mean, and what's funny is like, you guys, if I tell you every memory I have is over here. I've told the story. Grasso was here, and Grasso came over and was talking to me like, "Hey, dude, don't be intimidated by all these knuckleheads or something, you know." And I was scared to death, you guys, because here I am with like people from the magazines, and I'm just like the kid from Lodi. So, absolutely amazing to see this photo. And where can we find all of the photo, like not all of, but like where are you putting these up where people can purchase them? Because that's what I bought the Pete Augustin one.
Yeah, and that Pete Augustin shot was actually that same weekend.
Oh, no way.
We just hiked away from the sports arena down there, or Long Beach Arena, to we're over closer to the shoreline a little bit.
Oh man,
So
that's amazing.
you
Yeah, that's great.
you might actually see it in the background on that shot. Um, if you Gaiby Moto is my Instagram account. I post up a lot of the same shots that I'll post up a lot of stuff there first, and then um, the other place is stevegiberson.smugdug or smugmug stevegiberson.smugmug.com.
I'll put it up on
And
the screen. You're good. Yeah.
thanks, yeah. And you know, I try and clean up as many of the dust spots and scratches, and the most of these slides have aged pretty well, but you have to work pretty hard to get them all spot free and
Right.
and
Right.
color corrected and cleaned up. So I've got some hours invested into it, but I'm curious to see if people are interested in purchasing prints, or actually I think you could go there and get a coffee mug with a photo you like on there.
Yeah.
I think there's a variety of different products that they have available. So it's been a work in progress and kind of an experiment. And when I'm done with BMX, and actually you could go there now. There's a little bit of motocross stuff in there. I've got 20 years of motocross stuff I'll start working on.
Right.
But it to me it feels a little bit better to work on it kind of chronologically. Um, I don't know if there's ever a book in the works or not. I've had quite a few people ask for it. I don't know if that's something that I want to dive into. And even as I would be working on it, it would be, man, I'd love to have these photos in it, but they don't exist anymore, or
Right.
they've gotten scattered to the wind somewhere along the way, or who knows where they've gone. Um, Later in later years, it was hard drive failures.
Right.
You might lose a whole year of photos,
Oh, I can't
and
even imagine.
that's
Yeah.
I should have backups for backups, but I don't know, deeped out on some hard drives, I guess. So
I I really like anything that I can do to peer pressure you into a book. I will absolutely do. And y'all go find him on Instagram. Send him a message if you think if you would be interested in a book. Because I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. The nostalgia part of BMX is I can't always get away from my work from home, Zoom meetings back to back, and typing away and just feeling like I'm in the matrix, for 8 hours a day with this new environment that we're living in with, post pandemic. And if I can break away for 10 minutes, eat something, but just kind of look through and just look at this picture and just think, man, how simple things were, pictures I haven't seen, and just the innocence and the just joy and creativity that we were all experiencing collectively as a group worldwide from these magazines and these photos. Dude, I really hope that you decide to take that on. I mean, I can't even imagine what goes into that, and the perfectionism of like, I want this perfect photo, but it's a, you know, an 80-year-old slide. I know how hard that is. That's just takes forever. But from a fan's perspective and just someone that hungers for that stuff, it is we don't have we didn't like, it's not like Instagram or even video where everything was recorded. We just have your photos and what you remember from that day. You know, oh yeah, that photo
Mhm.
was, you know, that was at Interbike. You know, that's a story behind that photo that I didn't know until we talked. Um,
Mhm.
so that brings these photos to life, and we really don't have anybody that's a historian like that. We, you know, God bless poor boy Steve for you know, trying to collect all the magazines and try and distribute them out and make them available to people. But you know, that's one person, and as soon as he gets burned out, dude, we're all done. We're back to trying to find issues on eBay. You know, like,
Yeah, he actually purchased a whole bunch from me.
oh, did he
So
really?
yeah, I
Yeah.
I sold all my old magazines a while back. So
Oh man.
um, yeah, I had them for years. I still have a few with special things like photos that I would have been in, or either bike tests or
Right.
racing, things like that.
Did you keep
Or
anything from back then, like jerseys or anything?
no, the memorabilia is long gone.
Yeah.
All the SE stuff, or you know Malcolm Smith gear that I would have had.
Right.
But I think the smug mug thing to me is like a first step. Uh, you know, hey, I'll try this out and see how it goes. And
Right.
I don't know about doing a whole book. I've had people ask, and um, probably people that are a lot smarter than me. So
Right. Well,
um,
I like that your answer is not a straight up no.
yeah. Well, I mean, do I do one just for BMX and freestyle? Do I do one, whole career with, because that's a whole lot bigger picture with 20 years of supercross and motocross. So, uh,
I would do a series, to
I
be honest with you. I would do a series, man. If you can stomach it, the time, I mean, the time, it's the time to do it all. But you, the thing about, you have ravenous fans in freestyle and BMX, and then you've got fans from mountain biking, and then you're going to have 20 years of supercross stuff. I mean,
yeah,
that's people that want to see those photos and show their kids, hey, you know, like, look at mom and dad back in 1990 something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's just amazing stuff.
it would be a lot of heavy lifting to do it all in one. So
Yeah,
that's
I hope you do. But even if we just, like, these pictures, like the picture of Peter Gusson, like, I get to have a moment because there's an 8x10 photo of Peter Gusson on my wall, just like there was when I was, you know, 12. This time it's framed instead of being stapled, an
and
X-Acto knife cut out of my magazine.
there's not many places to get that kind of stuff anymore.
There's there's not.
I mean, maybe Greystoke, when a new issue comes out now, you
Yeah,
can
I'm stoked about
find some of that.
Greystoke. I got to tell you, I think they're doing a great
Yeah,
job.
and I've contributed to, you know, when the Nike did that freestyling book and had Andy and Lou work on that.
Yeah,
I contributed some stuff to that.
yeah,
The birth of the freestyle movement. I contributed some stuff to, the various incarnations of that.
right.
Um, so,
Yeah,
and sometimes that's where things get scattered. I think
I
I
bet.
actually, well, Dom Phipps was the guy that did that book, and he sent, I had to bug him a while back, and hey, can you send me back anything that you've got? And then all of a sudden, I've got some Jeff Carson photos that somebody else shot from back in the day. So I I need to return those to Dom. If
Right.
if he's wondering where they're at, I think I know. So,
Right.
but at this point, it is kind of a lot of heavy lifting where I'm scanning slides individually, working on them individually, and so it's pretty time consuming. Once I get to the later years where it's all on hard drives, that's you know a, a little less work going on there.
Right.
So,
Right. Right. Well, you guys, when you do buy a picture over off of his Smug Mug, they're going to offer you an option to upgrade the photo and print it on like a metallic type paper. I cannot, I cannot encourage you to do that enough. Like when I opened up my picture, it's on like what do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've seen the option for it, but I haven't seen what it looks like other than you sent me a photo.
Yeah, I've tried to capture it in photos. I've tried to like do this and show you the shine on it. It looks like it's printed on a piece of aluminum, just a real thin piece of aluminum. But it's white, but it just has like a metallic look to it, and it is so impressive. Trust me, it will make it pops. It really, really pops. Yeah, I'm looking at it. That's why I keep looking to the left. It's sitting over
Yeah.
here on my wall.
To me, it sounds like kind of like a Chrome print from back in the day. It's got kind of a glow to it almost.
It's kind of like that. Yeah, it's a unique finish. I don't have any other. I have like chroma something. I don't know. It's weird. It's a great looking photo. Definitely pay that extra. It's cheap. It's worth it. If you're gonna go buy something to hang up in your house, spend an extra like $3 to get the metallic print. Trust me, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you so much, man, for hanging out. I
Oh,
cannot
thank
thank
you.
you enough for the history lesson. Just sharing like what it was like to be there. And most of all, just thanks for being a fan, and being such a big part of like a collective kids that are now 50, that grew up reading your stories, inspired by your photos and all the crazy stresses you guys went through to get that magazine out so that I could ride my bike over to the bookstore and grab a copy every month and drink my Mountain Dews out front on the curb, catching up with everybody 3 months later, right?
Yeah. No
It's
worries.
just
Yeah,
amazing.
it's been fun to go through all that stuff and relive some of it. And it's funny, lately I've been going, hey, here's this guy. I'm not sure who this is. Help me out here a little bit.
Right. Yeah,
So
I saw that the other day. Like, help me identify
so
this.
yeah, sometimes there are times when I'm like, I remember doing the shoot, but and for whatever reason I can't remember the name of the guy, or
Right.
it's kind of funny. So yeah, maybe I'd better hurry up and get started on the book before all that stuff is out the
Oh,
window.
dude. Yeah, trust me. But as a fan and as a writer of BMX, dude, like we're stoked to see anybody. You know what I mean? Like it's a photo I haven't seen. I don't care if I know who it is or not. If they're shredding, shred, bro. You
Yeah,
are, at that point you are the unknown racer. You're all of us. You're every kid that rode a track and tried to do a tabletop, and you're everybody. That's the beauty of
yeah,
that stuff. Like we all had that same experience. We all collectively experienced it, either did it, read about it, obsessed about it, built bikes to do it. Everybody
try
played a
tried
part.
or try to emulate what you see in any of those photos. Yeah,
Yeah, trying to figure out the sequences, man. I can't tell you how many times, especially when like Andy and Lou would be like all artistic and maybe they'd go backwards or like make it do an S, and you're like, bro, you understand I have no idea if he's going left or right. You understand that, right? Like,
but yeah, it needs a one at the beginning. But I
yeah,
actually, that was one thing. I shot a very young Tony Hawk at Del Mar Skate Park doing a 540, and that ran in the first issue of Freestyling as a sequence.
yeah.
And they had one of the photos flopped in the middle of the sequence, and you just kind of go, "Oh,
Oh no.
killing me!" Yeah. So if you have a first issue of Freestyling and see that sequence,
Yeah.
you'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, just kind of crushing to because he did two or three of them, and I think I asked him to do one more, and then I never saw him again.
Yeah.
So
He's like,
yeah,
yeah, cool, man. Cool story.
yeah, yeah. Cool story, bro.
Yeah. So thank you so much for hanging out. Tune into our next episode, catch up on all of the big bike BMX news. We'll talk to you guys soon. Take care, everybody. See you, Craig. Ba, 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 ba.